Why was the Graffiti movie never finished? Because they kept painting on the fourth wall. So I know you through a mutual friend. You and him have painted with each other and have been friends with each other for a number of years now. And your art is amazing. Every time you post a picture on the socials, it just blows my mind away at how not only is someone able to do something like that, but that someone's able to do it that well is just a treat. And I just wanted to go over more in detail of how you got into painting and graffiti and art as a whole.
Thank you for the kind words. So often we don't actually get a ton of feedback other than likes on Facebook, but to actually hear someone say stuff like that is very encouraging. I appreciate it. How I got into graffiti? I guess as a little kid, somewhere around the age of 13 or 14, so that would have been 83 or 84, I fell in love with rap. There's a couple breakdance movies that had some graffiti in it, and probably one of the first rap albums that I bought was by a breakdance crew called Rocksteady Crew, and they had a bunch of characters and graffiti on their album cover, and that's what started my love of it. And then from there, did some really horrible graffiti back then, obviously, because the cans sucked, and I was in a small town of about 3,000 people, and basically nothing new coming into the town. So it was basically just those items that I mentioned to you earlier that were pretty much the only influence, pretty much up until 89, when I moved to the Oakville area to take classical animation at Sheridan College. Then graffiti kind of went on a back burner for a while, but it always crept back in here and there. And then fast forward to now, I think I've been back at it now for maybe about 12 years and just loving it. Trying to do as much big stuff as I can now before my body doesn't let me do it anymore. After every paint, it starts to hurt more and more. My buddy Skinny, which is also your friend, the last wall that we did was the first time I really heard him complaining about his body afterwards. But then again, he might have just been making me feel better.
Maybe.
Know.
I would imagine all the reaching and then bending.
Bending down, doing those squats to pick up cans or to paint low on the wall. That's probably the hardest thing on the body. I like to go a little bit bigger, and I tend to always do pieces that I end up using a ladder for. And just the constant up and down, and then, not being smart at times and taking up the wrong can, or a cap falls so you have to go back down needlessly, But that's all a part of it. I like my stuff to be readable from a good distance too, so that kind of helps by going bigger.
You had mentioned that you went to Sheridan for, I believe it was animation.
Yep, classical animation.
How was your time there?
It was riddled with good and bad stuff. The teachers were amazing at what they did, but I don't know if they were amazing teachers all the time, because sometimes they would just leave sign-in sheets and leave it up to us. But at the same time, I was so young at the time, and maybe my work ethic, I guess, wasn't there. So maybe it wasn't the greatest pairing for me. At the time, I was also much more interested in going skateboarding and going to raves. So kind of also developed a bit of a drug problem at the time. But that was something I eventually ended up kicking. It took a while, but everyone has different paths in their lives. Even though I didn't get into the industry afterwards, I do owe pretty much 90% of my style to having gone to Sheridan College for classical animation and that whole background influence.
Yeah, because what I've noticed about not only your graffiti, but the custom pieces and paintings that you've made for people, or the little tiny canvases, there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but cartoony characters, which I absolutely love.
Right on.
So I would assume that that was drawn heavily, pun intended, drawn heavily from your time at Sheridan?
Definitely. Even when it's not just characters, something about having studied classical animation and movement, I think shows up a lot of times in my overall compositions, things in it to keep your eyes moving around. I don't feel that it's very static.
There's another person, and I'm sure I think you've met him before, who does a similar theme with characters as Eugene Lee.
I've met him a time or two. He's probably the best artist that has ever done graffiti in London, I would say. A legend in many, many people's minds, and deservingly so.
He transferred his skills over to tattoo work. Is that something that you could see yourself doing?
No, because one, you'd have to touch people, and no, thank you.
Yeah.
Also, at this stage of the game, my sight isn't what it used to be. My back probably could not handle what a tattoo artist goes through. As far as artists that are out there, everyone that I know that does tattoos, I would say are pretty much my favorite artists here in London, and they're also the ones that grow the fastest. Tara Nurse's artwork has just gotten absolutely crazy. It's just because she's like drawing every single day.
It is something that seems, with different types of art forms as well, would have to be pretty consistent. I draw a crappy little comic strip with like 2 characters. That's the only thing I can really draw. And if I have a moment, if I'm on the phone or listening to like Spotify or a podcast, I'll just draw the turtle character that I do over and over again, and
Perfecting it over time.
perfecting it almost to the point where it's like muscle memory. About the graffiti artists in London, I have an experience with graffiti vicariously through our friends and the people who I grew up with, so I know a little bit about the scene. But, you know, there are those artists of lore in London that have painted through the ages, like Rebos and Waters and Snare and the younger people, probably about my age, and some
all
of
huge names. Yeah.
I think the Waters piece that is to the east of the Wonderland Bridge along the river might be completely gone now. It faded over the years from the water.
Fading, chipping. Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like you're going north on Wonderland, you look to your right, and it's at the retaining wall.
Honestly, I haven't looked down into that area for a long time while driving along that way, but I'm sure if any remnants of it was still there, it probably would have caught my eye. So I would probably guess you're right. The water has, in time, damaged it and probably all but erased it. Which happens under bridges too, where they're protected. But paint going over top of paint dozens and dozens of times, it's just going to chip easier and easier as it goes along.
Along the lines of graffiti artists, what would you say are your biggest influences when it comes to graffiti?
There's people in Europe especially, like Erase, the ETAM crew, people like that are some of my favorites. There's just so much that's accessible now through Instagram and Facebook that it's just a constant flow of new and amazing things to look at. That's pretty great for people that are coming into it now, as opposed to when I did. Because, like I said, especially because my area, there was like practically zero influence and people to learn from, where now it's just like click and you have the world at your feet. It has to be about the same thing for skateboarding too. I mean, like we had some Bones Brigade videos and Alva videos, but it was the same ones over and over that we would watch. Where nowadays it's like click on something and it's just the world at your feet to learn from.
And I would imagine growing up in a smaller area with very limited sources of inspiration to draw from would actually be a benefit, because you're developing more of your own style rather than being influenced by someone else, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you develop more of your own style just sort of out of necessity.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably a large factor in how and why my stuff looks the way it does. Because I often don't paint the same thing, right? I'm always painting something different. So a lot of graffiti artists, they're perfecting that same thing over and over with, technical adjustments here and there and different add-ons or different colorways. But essentially, a lot of people kind of flow with the same thing for a while because they're trying to make that the recognizable thing, right? Where I feel like even though I often paint different things and it's usually characters, I'm starting to do more and more letters lately, but even though I'm doing different characters quite often, I think people could look at my stuff and know that it's mine. That has to partially attribute to that I didn't have as many influences, so I just came up with my own identity.
We were talking a couple weeks ago, and we had gotten on the topic of we were talking about a couple years ago, the Masterpiece Festival. How was that experience? And I believe we were talking about some of the artists that were considered for it and how that sort of played out.
The Masterpiece Jam is one of the things I'm most proud about in my art career. I made a roster of artists, many local and many that weren't local. The roster ended up being myself and 4 other people that were from out of town. I faced a little bit of backlash over that. People thinking that there wasn't enough local content, but there's so many things that revolved around it between vendors, craft beer people, musicians, breakdancers, the full festival kind of feel. And out of 100 people, pretty much only 4 people weren't local. But I do understand, it would have been nice to have more local painting on the spaces, but there was only a small handful of spaces to give out. By having people from out of town, I think it gave a very different feel to the wall as opposed to what a lot of London has throughout it. It was even friends that were on the list that didn't make it. I think if anyone were to look at the list and who was on it, of that, I would probably be the least deserving to have been on it, but because it was sort of something that I helped create, I got an obvious spot.
So growing up and doing graffiti over the years, everybody has some stories, especially if you're going out like in train yards and under bridges and stuff. What are some stories of you painting where it might have not been the best situation for you to be in?
I don't have a whole lot of stories like that. I've played it pretty safe over the years. One time in Oakville, there's a bridge near Glen Abbey Golf Course. We actually belayed off the bridge one time. I don't know how tall it was, but when we got halfway down, we tied off and we smoked a joint, and then we finished our way down to the bottom, and our ropes were about 15 feet too short, so we had to drop ourselves to the ground. Anyways, that's not an actual painting story, but painting under that same bridge, it had these weird kind of juts that came down, so like you could walk for like 15 feet and then this concrete would come down, so you'd have to duck further to keep walking, and then you'd stand back up in the next hollow. So anyways, we went down to start painting down there, and I'm talking to my friend, duck down under the first one, stand up for the next one, and as we approached the next one, I cranked my head on it because I didn't duck in time. I was looking to the side, talking, then I looked forward because I knew it was about time to duck again. Cranked my head and knocked myself out. So that wasn't a very good time.
No, it
As
doesn't
far
sound
as
like it.
police, one time was actually here in London, and it was actually a legal wall. We just weren't being very smart. We were painting at nighttime. 3 of us were painting, then all of a sudden we're surrounded by like about 8 cop cars. They had their guns out, everything. We were there legally. It still wasn't a fun feeling, though.
No, it doesn't sound like it. There's something that I've always wanted to figure out, and I don't know how much you know about like the London scene, but I heard a story that there was a graffiti artist who was banished from the city.
Okay.
Does stuff like that happen? I'm not sure I'm trying to remember who it was, but
I think that was ORES.
I think
Yeah,
so
Friends
too.
to Snare. Yeah,
Yes, I think that was.
yeah, because I guess partially just because he went ape shit and just was like crushing stuff, and it was very directed towards the city bylaw officer.
Orestatolik.
So yeah, so you do something like that, and you're definitely gonna gain some attention and some extra payback on you, or whoever you've made your focus as a graffiti artist towards doing something towards. If they have some power, then they're gonna do what they can against you when they get their shot, and they did. But other than that, that's as much of as I know of that story, because I wasn't friends with the dude. Not enemies, but we weren't friends, so I don't have much more that I could say about it.
You had mentioned cans earlier. How has the technology of spray painting changed over the years as far as the cans and the colors and the different caps and stuff?
Just everything you mentioned. I mean, like the paint itself, the formulas that they're doing now have much better UV rates on them. There's multiple brands to pick from with multiple price points, and you often get what you pay for. Some of the cheaper ones have a little less control maybe and are better suited for, say, if someone wants to go out bombing, because it's going to come out harder and faster. And that same paint might not have the same UV ratings in them. So perhaps using them on a piece that you want to last for 5 years to a decade out in the open wouldn't be the greatest choice. They have every kind of cap under the sun, but the caps really come down to what you're comfortable with. I basically use 2 caps for the most part, because I can replicate many kind of different effects with both of them. So there's no need to use a billion different ones. If someone wants to, that's at their beck and call to do.
The only really good brand that I know of, just again vicariously through my friends, is Montana.
Yeah, Montana Black. That's my go-to. I like the feel of it, the smell of it. Like there's a lot of paints out there that I just can't stand the smell of. But Montana Black, my brain says you're having fun when I start to smell it.
How frequent in the graffiti culture are rivalries, or, for lack of a better word, beefs between artists on maybe, say, one side of the town or the other side of the town, or like a mutual respect even, but more so rivalries?
That comes in many different forms. Sometimes it's just a matter of someone new to the scene and they want to make names for themselves, or friends that were once friends and then through whatever reasons are no longer friends. That's the type of beef I have, and I have 2 of them out there. One which is absolutely at this point not even worth mentioning. The other one I have a pretty good hate for, but it's not a very active beef. Sometimes beef can also come in the form of so many of the guys that paint here grew up here. So that goes back to their younger ages. That can come from, I'm from this part of town, you're from that part of town, I'm friends with these guys, you're friends with those guys. So automatically I'm not going to like you. Or in my case, I think a lot of people often didn't like me right from the get-go because I didn't grow up here. I didn't start here. So it's like my history doesn't matter because it's not a part of their history. Right now, the one beef I have with someone, it basically stemmed out of me giving them a wall and them not finishing it, and me harping on them to finish it for like 5 months. And then our friendship ended. There was nothing between us for a good long while. Then all of a sudden he started deciding to cap my stuff. So it's like, okay, I guess he still has ill feelings.
Now, by cap, what do you mean by that?
Burning, I would say, is if someone came and did a legitimate, something awesome over top of your piece. Capping, I would say, is just coming and hitting a messy tag over top of your stuff, just to let you know that they're still there, sort of thing. No effort, just boom, here, I'm going to ruin your piece.
Because that's the thing I've noticed about graffiti and the graffiti culture is there's sort of two types of graffiti. There's the artful kind, which is beautiful and takes a lot of planning and practice and effort to do. And then there's the territorial kind, which is more quick, not as nice looking, but it's more of like a signpost or a warning saying, like, this is our part of town. Do not paint your stuff in our part of town.
I guess that's sort of true in the sense, but I don't think too much is territorial. I think some of it is guys that don't like other guys, and so they'll just cap their piece. It's funny. It's like graffiti kind of has like these unwritten rules that aren't really rules unless they apply to your own personal agenda almost. Those guys that go out and just cap stuff, that's what they're trying to get out there. So I can't qualm them on that. I mean, like, that's where you derive your pleasure from doing this. It's not how I do, so I can't lessen what you do. But at the same time, you know, the rules of this shouldn't go over that and that shouldn't go over that doesn't apply if the one style of person doesn't see that higher style as even being a part of graffiti. So it's like, just because that's a mural done with spray paint doesn't mean it's graffiti to that person. So suddenly they can go over it with a lesser form of graffiti or lesser time. Like, I'm not saying it's lesser in quality in the sense of what it's meant for, but it's lesser in amount of time and money, especially. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, that totally makes sense. It's almost like these rules that you're talking about are very subjective to the person. It's like they might not value a mural the same way that they value like a bomb or a really complicated piece. Now that you're a lot older and have been painting for many years, are there any artists around town or the region now that you notice that look very promising to you as far as talent?
Oh, well, I have to think of exactly what names I'd want to say there. The town has been pretty quiet overall. There's someone new, Rodney, that I've been painting with a little bit. Very dedicated and very productive. I can see if he sticks with it for a long time, he could get pretty good. The other names I would want to mention, they've actually been doing it for a while. They're just getting better. As far as younger people and stuff, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to other people painting for the most part. I just kind of do my own thing. I don't go out much unless it's to go do a little bit of painting. So I'm not socializing and meeting other people much. So it's hard to say up and coming people.
When I was hanging out with my friends when they did it, and then they sort of grew up, I guess you could say. And I don't mean that in a negative way. They just sort of stopped doing it as much as they were doing it. There was a new generation of artists who came after them that held them with regard and wanted to hang and paint with them. And there were a couple, but it's just like you said, the scene is quiet right now. And that's probably has a huge amount to do with the bylaw officer, Oras Katolik, who's a real hard ass. I remember him being a huge hard ass on some of my friends. I guess that is his job. It makes him a good bylaw officer. You're not doing your job right if you're letting people run amok in your city. One question
Sadly, they're not finding alternatives for people either, though. But that can also fall into the category of just because you built a skate park doesn't mean the kids are going to skate on their way to the park. But it would be nice if the city gave opportunities more. There's no reason that there's so much in the town that could be utilized, but we're not unique to other cities. I mean, it's much the same.
Like there's that huge underwater themed piece off of Dundas. I forget what building it's on the side of, but
it's Fari building.
The Fari, yeah. What chance. Isn't? Which one?
Yeah. And he's the most prolific tagger in town. He has his name on every building. Yeah.
That's true. One story that I've always wanted to know, because I don't really, and without getting into specifics, like personal specifics, is how did you and Skinny start painting with each other?
I think the first collaboration would have been when Art Fusion had the one alleyway jam, and I painted the red bird, and underneath it, Skinny did his wild style to make it look like a nest that the bird was standing.
Is that the one where it's eating worms? Like it has its wing
Yeah,
up and it's feeding itself? Cool.
yeah. As far as for that one, it's like a bunch of us went to a meeting or a couple meetings at the gallery, and we were all discussing what to do as far as a theme. And the first theme that came up was a Titans sort of thing. So we were all supposed to come back 2 weeks later and have some sketches and talk about it from there. Because the spot where I did the red bird, it wasn't locked down as going to be mine. It was like we're going to look at everyone's sketches and see what everyone comes up with and then decide who got the big spot, right? So anyways, 2 weeks pass, and the only two of us that had actually done sketches were Skinny and myself. And I had done, I forget what the character is, but it's from a Disney movie. And while we were all talking about it, everyone decided we don't want to do the Titans theme anymore. We want to go more with a forest city, something to do with forests kind of theme. So everyone's like, okay. And then another 2 weeks pass, and we come back with drawings again. And in that time, since Skinny was the only one who had come up with one, and when I started to do my design, I was like, be kind of neat to have that Skinny guy paint under mine, because he could probably do what he had done before and make it look like a nest. So I talked to him about that. So I did the bird, he did the nest. We came back for the next meeting, and again, we were the only ones that did any drawing. So at that point, it was like, okay, you guys can have this space. That was the first thing we did together.
It's funny that you mentioned that because there is a lot of planning and professionalism, I guess, as much as you want to put into it. With art and graffiti, I would imagine there are some people who do take it less seriously than others, and if you want to get good at it and have your pieces look really clean and awesome, you sort of have to treat it from a higher standard.
For me, like everybody has their own methods about going how they do graffiti and stuff. But for me, I'm not overly on the spot, make it up kind of guy. I prefer to come over planned, and with over planning, I feel like it's that much easier to go off plan because I've already explored some of the pluses and negatives of my design, and I know my design enough through all that planning that I'm able to veer from it with some improvements at the point of actually painting. That's what works for me and what makes me comfortable. For other people, they want to go off the feel. Maybe it's a timing thing, I don't know, but different things work for different people.
Over the years, what would you say you painted more frequently? Walls or under bridges, or did you paint trains more?
Definitely walls. I haven't painted a train in like 20 years, I'd say. Yeah, I've painted a few bridges recently, but I like walls out in the open, legal walls, because I like a project that's going to take 3 to 4 days on average. Bring a ladder, take your time, and people have an opportunity to see it that normally wouldn't see it.
Yeah, you're not looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, but stuff under a bridge, it's like a 2 hour thing max usually. You can go longer at some chill bridges, but the only people who are going to see it are if you're brave enough to post it online, or the people that are going under bridges as well. I like my stuff to be seen. I like it to be somewhere like the Benson wall that we just finished. On these gray days, people driving to work will catch this big boom, just shot of color off to the side. And it might cheer up somebody's day at some point, or they know they're going to see it, so as they pass by, they'll take a quick glance and have a shot of color, and maybe it'll put a smile on their face, who knows.
It's cool that you and Skinny were able to hook up that Benson wall, because I used to work there actually, and you also did the wall of the Tracks Bar and Grill across the street.
I've done two pieces there. I did a Mexican wrestler, and Skinny did a little piece off to the side of that one, and then more to the middle of it, we did a Homer Simpson one floating in space, and we both had our names flanking either side of it. And then across the road, I went with Simpsons again, which is funny because I haven't painted Simpsons anywhere else, but for some reason, across the road from each other, I got two Simpson pieces. And that one we didn't do as a collaboration. Skinny just did what he does beside mine. But somehow with the way he did his fill on this one, and that he had his main overall structure lines as four main different colors, somehow I think it still relates into mine, because I had some snakes in my design, and the fill of his somehow makes me think of snakes.
You and Skinny also did the side of the Velodrome, which is the old London Gardens building. That looked pretty sick as well. When you approach these business owners, what is usually the response of you asking them if you can do a legal piece on their wall?
Two good stories, both relate into the Masterpiece Jam. The Masterpiece Jam, I went out looking for places to paint, and I found a building that was fairly dilapidated and needed a lot of love. I was dressed nicely. I had my iPad with me. I went in to talk to them about it, and I got the front desk woman, gave my spiel, and she just looked at me blankly and was like, "The door's right there, you can leave." I was like, can I just talk to your bosses, see what they think? And she said, "I know what they would say, and as I said, the door is right there." I was pretty pissed off, so I left, and I was a little depressed by it, so I was like, I'm going to just give up, go home. So on the way home, I'm thinking, yeah, tonight I'm going to come back and draw a 50-foot-long dick on their building. But that's not me. That's not the kind of thing I would do. And I fizzled out by the time I got home. And then I decided I want to reach out to a really nice spot that I've been eyeing up for about 20 years and see what they think. And I got the answering machine, and then within a half hour, Laura De Silva from the convention center gave me a call back. Within a day, I went down, we met, we talked about it, and I painted that first pillar for free. And I think it was a 4-day project, and because it was really hot, so I made the sessions pretty short. But anyways, on the last day, she came out and she said, "We're going to make something legit out of the other pillars. We just don't know what." And then I didn't hear from them for a while. And then I was like, I want to paint again. So I'm going to call them, see if I can paint the other side of the pillar that I had just painted. Lori was, "Your ears must have been ringing. We were just about to call you. Why don't you come down tomorrow and we'll talk about doing the other pillars up." So I went down, and it basically ended up turning into a $75,000 project, which brought 4 other artists from out of town in. They got legit pay, they got their stay, their paint covered, and so much came out of that. One of the things that came out of it was meeting Jug, and Jug owns the Velodrome. Well, the Velodrome is actually a separately run business inside of his building. He runs the business, but he doesn't run the biking part of it. So anyways, I met him at the pillar when I was painting, and he said, "I have a building. Well, we talked about it at some point, and we were possibly going to make it into a big jam, and that kind of fell apart, but he was still open to me painting it and kind of curating it to having other people come paint along with me." So Skinny obviously is the number one person that I would have there with me.
The Tracks Restaurant 1 and the Benson Wall, which are where Horton turns into Hamilton. What are some other pieces that are still up around town that, location-wise, people can go and check out?
One of my favorite pieces, it's kind of hard to describe how to get to it. Queen and Dundas in behind where the Honest Lawyer used to be. There's kind of like a little alleyway to go in behind One London Place.
It's like behind Nooners and like the Scots Corner and stuff.
There's a little way to deacon in behind all those buildings, and I have a wall there. I've done a piece which has kind of a sushi ninja theme to it, and then beside mine is a piece by Haste, and beside him is a piece by Demo, and I like the combo of those three all beside each other. It looks pretty nice. Another spot I really like is Thompson and King Edward. I haven't gone out to paint there this year, but it's a building that has given me free reign around their whole building. 5 pieces on that one. Also, another one that I used to really like was on Central in Adelaide, but just this summer, the city took that building down because they need more room for the Adelaide underpass that they're creating. Pretty sad to see that building go.
I've noticed recently that there's been a lot of murals being painted around downtown, over near the market and the Richmond Street underpass towards Labatt's. The whole entire wall has pieces on it. And it's like what you were saying earlier is I really feel that London would benefit from opening up more of their walls, sort of embrace the artists of the city and make it colorful instead of like a bland gray concrete jungle.
The best 2 things is to look at a before and after of a spot and just see how much it transforms it. Not everyone can do that because obviously not everyone would have a picture of what the wall looked like blank compared to afterwards. But what everyone can do is on a gray, sad-looking, stark day, just pass by a mural and see how much of a beacon of color and emotion.
What's the farthest away one of your pieces is, geographically?
I would say Ottawa. I went to a House of Paint jam a few years back. That was a lot of fun. I would definitely like to travel more for painting. I don't know if that ship has sailed for me. Maybe I'm just not making the connections here and there. I've sent out a few, like when I've seen artist calls for different places, and I just haven't made the cut.
We were talking a couple weeks ago, you did 4 pieces for the factory obstacle park inside the old Kellogg's building.
Oh yeah, that was like such a treat. Like they were like the perfect employer or mural buyer, I guess, in that they just really just let me do what I wanted to do in each of the spaces that I did there. Within reason, of course, right? Like I came to them with solid plans and they're like, okay, let's go for that. Even more than that, it happened during the middle of winter. It's so hard being in the area that we are because you don't have much opportunity in the wintertime. So painting that winter, I don't think I've had a happier winter in my life, pretty much.
I have a friend who works at the factory and they were saying that they really enjoy looking at the pieces, and when I mentioned that I know the person, they were like, oh, that's so cool because they painted at my work. And
right on. That's cool to hear.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking to you, man. I really appreciate that we could do this again. And if people want to check out your work, they can go to the locations that you had mentioned, or I believe they can search on Google for Ani33. It's ANI-33.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking to me. It's been fun chatting.
You can check me out on Instagram and TikTok at Scott_loves_puns. Puns is with a Z. You can also find me on YouTube, Scott Loves Puns _ASMR. And you can also purchase my audiobook and new comedy EP for only $2 and $1 at swoaudio.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening and have a good night.